Go on, get seated down. So, this man named Hosea, he was a prophet. In fact, he was a young prophet. The Bible says that when God first began to speak through Hosea, so he was a young minister just getting started. He's all excited because he's felt the hand of God on his life. He felt the call of God. And as he was a young man coming up, he studied the Word of God. He was committed to God. He wasn't doing the things that his friends were doing. He lived in a wicked generation. They worshiped idols, but he had kept himself pure. He lived in a situation really a lot like a lot of us, where in your schools, around you, in your families, people aren't living for God. Even people who would claim to know God, maybe they're not living the way they should. And so he has kept himself. He has been righteous. He has not turned his back on God. He has lived for God. And finally, as a young man, God is starting to speak through him. It says, when God first began to speak to Israel through Hosea, right at the beginning, and Hosea is all excited. A young minister, maybe just got his license, and he's getting ready. He just preached his first revival, and man, this is good. God had moved, and so this is awesome. And then God speaks to him. He's praying one day, and he's all pumped about what God is doing. And then God says, "Hey, Hosea, I want you to go marry a prostitute." Just like out of the blue, out of nowhere. He's having a good old time. He's doing the work of God. He's prophesying. And God's like, go marry that prostitute. What? Like, can you imagine? You're like 20, 21 years old. Braden, you're going to be 20, right? Right? Braden feels the call of God on his life. He's all excited. And God tells Braden to go marry a prostitute. Not just a woman with loose morals, not just a woman who is not the best, a acting prostitute. Go to the street corner and pick her up off the street corner and take her and go marry her. That's the situation we're talking about, okay? This is you can read it yourself. This is in the Bible. God tells him to go marry a prostitute as an example to God's people, as a living prophecy, as a living message, as a living example. And so God tells him that this is going to be an example to the people, to show them their wickedness, to show them that they have rejected God and that they have been prostituting themselves with idols and with the nations around them, that they have rejected God. And so Hosea, I don't know about you, I don't think I would have done it. Honestly, I don't know that I would have been that spiritual to okay, God, that's not you. That is not you. I know that ain't you, God. God, you would never tell me to do something that's uncomfortable. Now, I'm not telling you that God's going to tell you to go marry a prostitute, okay? I would advise you very strongly against it. But in this case, God did. And so Hosea obeys. He goes out and he finds this woman, prostitute named Gomer. Her name is Gomer. There's a reason why you've probably never met a woman named Gomer. First of all, it's a weird name. But second of all, she was a prostitute. And people don't generally name their kids after prostitutes. Just so you know, we will not be naming our baby after a prostitute. Just to clear that up. But Hosea goes and he marries this prostitute named Gomer. And he begins to build a life with her. He marries her and he falls in love with this woman. He takes her out of the life that she had been living, the wicked life that she had been living, on a street corner, going from place to place, satisfying the needs of others, selling herself. And he takes her from that life where she has no value except what pleasure she can bring somebody for a moment. Nobody loves her, nobody cares for her, nobody takes care of her. She has to fend for herself. And he plucks her out of that kind of life and he marries her. Remember, this is a godly man with a good reputation, and so he takes his good godly reputation and covers her with it. And so now she went from being the lowest of the low to now she has a place in society. Now people still whisper, hey, isn't that woman? She doesn't quite look the same. She's not dressed like she was. She don't look quite the same, but I swear I've seen her before. Hey, isn't that the prostitute? And so people still recognize her and still know who she is, but Hosea loves this woman. He builds a life with her. They get married, they go on their honeymoon, they come back. He's still trying to do the work of God. He's still prophesying. He's still speaking the word of the Lord, and she's right there with him as his wife, the wife of the prophet. She's the pastor's wife. The pastor's wife, that former prostitute. And he's preaching to the people about living right with his wife, the prostitute, right next to him. And so as time goes on, despite her past and despite the struggles, he loves her. He provides for her. He cares for her. He buys her new clothes. He gets rid of all the inappropriate stuff she wore before to attract attention. And now he gives her things that to cover herself in grace and in beauty, in modesty and in holiness. She doesn't have to keep eating in the establishment she was at. Now she has a home and they can go eat at whatever restaurant. And he provides for her, and he does what any good husband would do for his wife. And as time goes on and they build this life together, then they begin to have children. And the first one was Jezreel. And God told him what to name his kids. And God said, these are going to be a sign for the people. Your whole life is going to be a prophecy and a sign to the people. And Jezreel means God scatters. And God said, this is to be a sign that because my people have not been living right, I will scatter them. And then time goes on, and he has a second child. And the name of this one was Lo Ruhamah. And this name means to not have pity. And God was warning them, if you keep going the direction you're going, there's going to come a day where there will be no pity for you. It can mean both that God will not have pity, but it really is pointing more to the Assyrian army who would later come and overtake them. And the Assyrians were some of the most wicked, vile, horrible people that ever were. And when they would conquer a city, they would have no pity on the people they conquered. They would take babies and little babies, jerk them out of their mama's arms and throw them off the city walls. If there were no city walls, they would take them to a cliff and throw them. Or they would pick up a baby by its legs and bash its head against a wall. They would take women who were pregnant and cut them open. They would take people, they would put spears in the ground, and they would take people by their arms and legs and impale them on spears. They were a people that would have no pity. And God was saying, if you don't get right, there's going to come a day where somebody's going to overtake you who will have no pity on you. But of course, the children of Israel kept living the way they did. And so Hosea and Gomer, now they have a third child. And the third name was Lo-Ammi. And Lo-Ammi means not mine. And it was both to mean that you will no longer be my people, my children. But it seems that somewhere along the way that during their marriage that Gomer had not remained faithful to Hosea. That during their marriage she had kind of slipped back to her old ways, and that while she had been given an unbelievable opportunity that she did not deserve, that for Gomer, she married a respected prophet and a man that took care of her, and when she had been at her lowest, he took her and made something valuable out of her, and yet, despite all he had done, she was unfaithful to her husband. And despite that he had loved her, despite that he had provided for her, and despite the fact that he had done everything for her, she took it all and threw it back in her face and went and was sleeping with other men. What he had rescued her from, what had been her destruction in the first place, and he had rescued her from it before she was selling herself. Hey, she didn't have to do that anymore. Before maybe there was an excuse, she didn't have anywhere else to go. She didn't have anybody to provide for her, and so she had to sell herself in order to eat and care for herself. Well, now she has somebody to care for her, and now she chooses to go back to that lifestyle. Despite what he had done for her, she chooses to go chasing after other men and to go back into that lifestyle. And it seems that maybe, and the Bible, it doesn't tell us completely all the details, but it seems that maybe Hosea had kind of had an inkling, kind of had a suspicion that she wasn't being faithful. And maybe even the first two children, maybe they weren't his, but there was no proof. But whatever it was, this third baby, when she had this third baby, it was obvious it was not his. Whatever it may have been, when she had that third baby, he looked at it and said, that's not my baby. Whose baby? What have you done? And if you can imagine the man of God who did what God told him to do and married this prostitute, and the shame and the hurt, embarrassment, because now he has these 3 little kids. Everybody knows what his wife came from. Everybody knows what he did. And now there is at least one of them that everybody looks at and says, yeah, hey, Hosea, who's the daddy? And he's still living right, doing right, and he's still trying to preach what is right. He has not turned his back on God. But now he's dealing with shame. And so now, and he's preaching things that people don't like. And so now he's preaching righteousness. And the people are standing there laughing and saying, hey, what about your wife though? Why don't you go preach at home a little bit, prophet? Why don't you go take care of your house? And but it didn't stop there. And so not only was the devastation and embarrassment of the fact that his wife had been cheating on him, and it was now obvious to all, but not only did she have this child, but she then chose to leave him, to leave his home, to leave him as her husband, and to return, completely leave that life behind and return to her squalor, to her pit of disgusting prostitute and selling herself and giving herself to this disgusting thing. And she chose to go that way. She chose to turn away from her husband and chose to give herself to that. And she just went from man to man, house to house, place to place, just getting paid a little bit here, a little bit there. No one to care for her, and she's back right in the pit of what she was before. And if it had been me, I don't think I would have married her in the first place, despite what God had said. And definitely after that baby was born, I don't think I could have handled that. But then she chooses to leave him. At that point, I would have been, well, God, see what you did? Well, now, like, I would move, I would leave, I'd go somewhere else where people didn't know me, I'd marry somebody else, I would move on with my life. She has chosen her path. God, I did what you said, now I'm going to go do my thing. And yet, after she left, Hosea chapter 2, verse 5 through 10 says, for their mother has played the whore. She that conceived them has acted shamefully. Talking about his kids, the Gomer that conceived his babies had acted shamefully. For she said, I will pursue my lovers who provide my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. I'm going to go chase after these other men, and I'll get I can get the things I need from them. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up your way with thorns. This is Gomer speaking, but as a prophecy, it's both Hosea speaking about Gomer and God speaking about Israel. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up your way with thorns and make a wall so that she will not find her path. He's still trying to keep her from what she's trying to do. She will pursue her lovers, but she will not reach them, and she will seek them, but will not find them. Then she will say, if I can keep her from getting there, if I can somehow stop her from going the way, then she will say, I will go and return to my first husband, for it was better for me then than now. Saying if I can stop her from going that way, maybe she'll remember me, and maybe she'll come back to me and remember how good she had it when she was my wife. He said, but she did not know that it was I who provided her the grain, the wine, and the oil. She thought all these men were providing her with things, but it was me the whole time, and multiplied her silver and gold that they used for Baal. Therefore I will take back my grain in its time, and my wine in its season, and I will recover my wool and my flax given to cover her nakedness. Therefore I will uncover her shame in the sight of her lovers, and no one will deliver her from my hand. So Gomer left her husband, who had given her everything, left his loving embrace for the arms of men that did not love her. She left his safety for a place and a life of danger. She left his provision to sell herself. She gave up his purity for vile corruption. And while you would think that would be the end, somehow Hosea still loved her. You talk about unimaginable love, where he still loves her. And she's over there, she thinks that she's being taken care of by all these guys. The Bible doesn't say how it happened. The Bible doesn't say what exactly happened. But Hosea somehow found a way to secretly still take care of her. She thought she was being taken care of by all this, man. She thought her life was great. Man, I'm out here doing my own thing. And I don't know how it happened. Maybe she had a place where men would come to. And she'd fall asleep in the morning, go out, and on her porch there would be some grain, or there would be some fruit, or there would be some clothes, or whatever it may be. And man, they're taking care of me. Man, they're giving me these good tips. They're paying me well. Man, this is good. Not knowing that her husband that she had left had been coming somehow secretly in the night and leaving. Still, even though she had rejected, still trying to care for her. Still trying to protect her. Still trying to show his love for her. And he realized that as long as I keep giving her what she needs, she will never come back to me. And so he says, I'm going to take it all back. I'm going to stop providing for her. I'm going to take it all back. I'm going to take back the clothes I gave her. I'm going to cause her shame in front of everybody that she's trying to be around. And so hopefully, now if a man said this, you'd think, oh, he's finally done and trying to get back at his wife. He's done. Well, good for him. She deserves it. But his motivation in all this was not to destroy her. His motivation was love, to try to get her to realize where she's at and that she had such a good life with him. All he wants is for her to realize where she's at and what she's missing, and to come running back to her husband's arms. That's all he wanted, was for her to realize how good she had it with him. And so while she's living in her adulterous relationships, he's behind the scenes just wanting her to come back. And so in love, he finally cuts her off. And then it says, Hosea chapter 2, verse 14, he said, but then I will win her back once again. Verse 16, he's still talking. He says, you will call me my husband. He's dreaming of the day when he can win her back again, when she'll come back home and be with him again, when she'll look at him and touch his face and call him my husband. And he says, I will make you my wife forever, showing you righteousness and justice, unfailing love and compassion. I will be faithful to you and make you mine. What love must a man have for a woman, that despite all that, he would still say such things? That I'll be faithful to you and make you mine. I will make you my wife forever. I'm going to win her back again. And so, causing her to go without and not have food, not have anything, while it may have been uncomfortable for her, it was in her best interest. And he was trying to bring her home. And finally, she reaches a place of absolute destitution where she has nothing left. She is completely destitute. She has no home. She has nothing to eat. She can't provide for herself, to the point where she is sold as a slave. This woman who had been given the chance of a lifetime, that by the grace of God, she'd been plucked out of that pit and put in a godly man's home and in his arms, and had a place of esteem in the community. And she chose to go back again, and now she is sold into a place of slavery. And you would think that would be the end of it. You would think that would be the end of the story, but God tells Hosea, I want you to go and buy her back. And so Hosea walks down to the marketplace where his wife is on display for sale as a slave. And he takes his hard-earned money with him, and he goes to the man who was selling her, who had chains on her, and said, hey, how much? And he wasn't saying how much like all those other men had asked. How much to get something from you? How much for you to take care of me? But how much to buy her back so that I can take her home and I can take care of her? And the man gave his price, and Hosea takes his money and the payment, and he sets it down. and he takes the chain off. He frees her. Says, come on, babe. Come on, let's go home. Takes her by the arm and walks home. This godly man walking with the worst of society. Her in her tattered clothes, dirty, hair unkempt, him in his well-kept robes, respectable. And leads her home. Takes her home, cleans her up. Washes her up, combs her hair. Gives her something good to eat. Restores her to the place as his wife. He did not buy her and keep her chained up in the basement and make her scrub his floors and make her as his slave. But he paid for, do you understand? He paid for his own wife who had sold herself. And yet so much love that he goes and he brings her back home to a spot at his table, to a place in his bed, to hold his hand. With those 3 beautiful little kids that one still isn't his. There's still that reminder of what she was. But despite all that, and I'm sure there were days where she struggled with it. And I'm sure there were days where she didn't feel worthy. And I'm sure there were days she asked him, why in the world did you do that for me? Why do you still love me? Why? You could have had anybody. Why would you choose me for your wife? And he looks her in the eye and just says, babe, I love you. I love you. All that's in the past. That's not who you are anymore. You're not a prostitute. You're my wife. You're not a slave. You're my bride. And the story of Hosea and Gomer ends with her not as a prostitute, not dying in a ditch somewhere, not dying from some disease that she contracted, but living out her days to her old age with her husband Hosea, who loved her so much that despite all the difficulties and despite everything she had done, he still loved her. And you wonder, what a crazy story. What does this have to do with me? I ain't a prostitute, and I don't know nobody that would have that much love. But just like God used this as an example to the nation of Israel, I want you to think about this and to listen to this, okay? Don't reject it. I want you to listen. Every single one of us is in the place of Gomer. Now, we may not be standing on a street corner selling ourselves, but all of us are a slave to something and have been a slave to something. All of us were a slave to sin. All of us were living a life that we should not be living. All of us are sinners and come short of the glory of God. All of us are in a place where we cannot provide for ourselves, we cannot save ourselves, we cannot deliver ourselves. We did not deserve the love of God. We did not deserve his mercy or his grace. We deserve death. We deserve punishment. We deserve to be lost in the lake of fire, to go to hell. That's what we deserve. God would be completely justified. You see, you have to understand how great he is, his majesty, his holiness, how perfect and pure, and there is no shadow of turning. The Bible says there is no sin, no iniquity. He is perfect in all his ways. And each of us on our own are sinners and are base and we have the Bible says our righteousness are but as filthy rags. What this literally means, and I'm not being crass or gross, but what this literally means is back they did not have good feminine hygiene products. You could not go to Walmart and buy tampons or pads. They would use a rag. And during that time of the month that women go through, that they would use a rag. And so the Bible says that our goodness, our righteousness is as disgusting as a used rag. That's what our goodness is. That's when we try to be righteous on our own. That's what it looks like. None of us deserve the love of God. And yet God, who is so holy and righteous and pure and perfect and could have anybody, create anybody, do anything he wants, chose to come to us in our place of darkness and in our place of sin and chose us and picked us up and cleaned us up. And he chose to put his name on us. The Bible calls us the bride of Christ. He chose us, and when we were baptized in Jesus' name, his name was put on us, just like Hosea's name was put on Gomer when they were married. Just like my wife has my name, and she has access to everything I have because of that name. Jesus put his name on us when we were baptized. And so the Bible calls us his bride. We are his. What an amazing love that God has for us, that he would choose to pick us up. But the story doesn't stop there for a reason. See, that would have been a good enough example, but that still would have left people out that God loves. See, there are some of us sitting here who we have known the love of God. Let me say, if you have never felt the love of God, if you don't know what it exists, the picture of Hosea and Gomer, of him taking her from out of that place and loving her, is a perfect picture of the love of God. He loved us when we were unlovable. He loves us not because of us, but because of him. He loves us not because of how worthy we are. It's not about being worthy. His love covers all of that. But there are some of us sitting here who have tasted the love of God. We have been brought into his family, had his name called over us, have been filled with his spirit. We know what is right, and we have felt his blessing and his protection and his love, and we've enjoyed all of that. And while we've had all that, we begin to wander back to the things that we lived in before. And we begin to taste of the things that we used to do. And then we become caught up again in things that we used to be caught up in. And we've gone back to our hellhole that we've given ourselves to, into that pit again. And we've gotten caught up and wrapped up until the point that now we have become again a slave to sin that Jesus brought us out of. And you come and you sit here knowing that you're not right with God, knowing that you're not living the way you should be, knowing that you're selling yourself to this world. You are selling yourself to things that do not love you. You're giving yourself to people and to things that do not care about you, that can never save you. While God is over there still waiting, still loving, still reaching, just wanting you to come back, just wanting you to return. And while you're in your sin, God still has his hand on you, still been protecting you, still been keeping you, still been providing for you. And sometimes it's easy to be living like that and see all the provisions of God and be like, wow, I'm okay. But if we don't return, there will come a point where God will say, I'm going to take all that back. Whatever it takes to get their attention, and he will take his hand off and allow you to come to the point of absolute desperation. All with the hope of, like what Hosea said, that maybe they'll remember how good it was and they'll come back to me, that you'll come back home to me again. Because his love is so great, his love doesn't wane, his love doesn't fail, it doesn't fade away. And so you sit here and say, well, I'm not good enough. I could never deserve the love of God. You're right. None of us deserve I don't deserve the love of God. None of us do. None of us do. And yet God still reaches for us, and his grace is still reaching for us, and his mercy, the Bible says his mercies are new every morning. Every day his mercy is reaching for us. And so look, I don't know each of your situations. I don't know what you're doing, how you're living, what you're caught up in. I don't know what you're thinking right now. But if you're in a place where you question the love of God, can God even love me? Can God even reach? Would he even want me back? The only reason people here at church, they put up with me is because they don't really know who I am. They don't know what I do when I'm by myself at night. They don't know how I cut myself or how I've attempted suicide. They don't know what I've done with my boyfriend or my girlfriend. They don't know what I've said, what I've thought. They don't know my attitude. They don't know the things that I do. And God doesn't, so how could he ever love me? Tyler, if you want to go ahead and come. How could God ever love me when he does know who I am? And he does know what I've done. And he sees every thought that I have. How could God love me? And the devil wants to keep you there blinded in a way. But if you can ever understand the love of God, that even when you are in the depths of sin, even when you've left him, rejected him, and went back to the things of the world, even when you've got caught up in the same things again, even when you've let yourself be taken slave and bound up by things in the world, the love of God doesn't fail. The love of God doesn't fade. And he's calling you tonight. Could we stand?